the General Assembly is an important organ within the United Nations system. It is the deliberative body where representatives of all countries all member states of the United Nations sit and negotiate and discuss all issues that are important to the world. But it is better known around the world in the functions it has of receiving every year during the general debate, which is the beginning of each session, heads of state and government come into the United Nations to discuss issues of urgent concern to the world. Those issues at times are structured around a particular theme, and this has been going on from the beginning of the establishment of the United Nations. It's a very, very important position, and every person so entrusted to leadership of that really important World Assembly is well honored with a huge responsibility which must be taken very seriously indeed. No, he's not the president of the world. He is president of the General Assembly, which is a body of 193 member states. Nigeria is one of the 193, and it is an honor to preside over the Assembly at its 74th session.
And when you talk about the United Nations General Assembly, are we looking at something akin perhaps to a world sort of parliament?
Yes, it has obviously some relationship to a parliament in that it does make laws, even if the laws are not really binding as such, but it sets targets, it sets norms for the world in relation to many things concerning development, concerning the oceans, concerning literally everything. So it is a parliament in that several issues are brought and resolutions are debated and taken if agreeable to the membership. If there is a parliament of the world, certainly it would be the United Nations General Assembly.
What about some who say that when you talk about the UN General Assembly, you are probably looking at an institution within the United Nations that happens to be, in their words, not mine, democratic. They say that because it goes about electing people and countries participate in those elections, unlike, for example, the more powerful body, which is the UN Security Council.
No, that perception is certainly a wrong one. The United Nations General Assembly is one of 6 organs of importance to the world as part of the United Nations as a system. Each part is extremely important in the work of the organization. Now, elections are conducted and really important discussions and decisions are made by the General Assembly. Of course, the better known organ that deals with what is called world peace is the one dealing with the Security Council, which you referred to. The Security Council decisions are also mandatory in terms of being binding, but not everything that is of importance or of importance to the world is in the purview of the Security Council. It is limited in what it does. It cannot deal with everything, and it will obviously not be right to refer certain things that have little direct connection to security matters or to the Security Council. Yes, the 15 members including 5 permanent members, have real power for the period they are there, if they are permanent. But even those who are not permanent, they have an opportunity to contribute. It is a contribution to maintenance of peace. This is critical. But all other organs are important, and all other organs do extremely important work. No certain matters concerning boundaries, concerning boundaries of countries, of oceans, agreements of real value in relation to development, including the Sustainable Development Goals agreed to in 2015, I think are all things done under the auspices of the General Assembly. It is extremely important.
What about critics who say that the UN General Assembly, yes, has teeth, but that those teeth do not bite? That the teeth that bite are found in the UN Security Council, which of course, as you said, happens to have 5 permanent members, of which Africa is not a member.
Well, I think the issue is this. The first element is really the whole question of what are the rules, what are the norms. These norms are set by and large by the generality of all of us, and it is at the General Assembly where every member of the world community as a nation has equal vote. Now, the 15 as 15 do not stand alone, because they are not 15, because they are only 15 within a certain called the United Nations. They are a subset of the system, and powerful as the 5 are, as you say, they do not constitute the totality of the work either of the Security Council or of the United Nations as a whole. Yes, it is true, it is a great position of power, if not of an authority, to be in that body. And yes, it is true, Africa is not represented on that council on a permanent basis, but Africa is represented by 3 members on a non-permanent basis. They have extremely important role to play in that particular position. Yes, there has been over at least a quarter of a century very focused discussion concerning how not only Africa, but other regions or other parts of the world can also belong to the Council in a manner that is considered reflective of not only the New World, but also the geographical spread of the world itself. I think that is important too. But no, it's not the case that the only thing that matters in the United Nations is the Security Council. That will not certainly be an exaggeration.
What about the fact that, yes, you do have, for example, those 3 countries from Africa that you have mentioned, which sit at the Security Council, but of course they do not have or enjoy veto power, like the 5 permanent representatives, and we're talking about the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Russia, and China. What about the fact also that a veto, unlike in other organizations like, say, the United States Senate, a veto at the United Nations Security Council cannot be overridden?
Yeah, yes, that is the setting of the mandate in terms of the Charter. And the whole question of whether that should continue, and if it should continue, how it will look or should look like, is part of the discussion concerning elements to be discussed in relation to the reform of the Security Council. And why? This is because, as you have observed, many have said that we need to consider what it is that the Security Council should do, including representation, including whether there will be a veto, and if there is a veto, how it might be exercised. These are matters under discussion. Yes, those countries that represent Africa in the case you are dealing with have important roles to play within the council, and other members who are not permanent members also play a very important role in discussing important matters of war and peace. And this is where we are at. The organization's charter was drafted and agreed to in 1945. That's a long period ago, a long time ago. And we are beginning from next year, we are celebrating or commemorating the 75th anniversary. And with it, of course, there have been focused discussion concerning what should be done 25 years on to the charter to reflect changing realities. This is where we are at. It's a difficult process, but it is a process already started, and it is important. There is no question. Representation is important. The whole question of power within the council is important, but these are matters under discussion.
You know, the first president of the UN General Assembly from the African continent was a great Ghanaian by the name Alex Kwason Sake. He became president of the United Nations General Assembly, if I remember correctly, in 1964. In 1964, you had what people sometimes refer to as the Congo crisis. And as you get ready to take your position, you still have a crisis that has never really been resolved in the Great Lakes region, especially the Congo. Do you have any plans to figure out how that can be resolved?
Well, I think you make a very important point, and that's an issue concerning longevity of conflicts that have harmed Africa and also other parts of the world. The Congo crisis and from DRC down has been a really serious one, and it is still continuing. But the situation has changed in that, first of all, the African Union itself is stronger in what it does in relation to peace. Countries also are now better able to deal with conscience of peace. And the United Nations is giving its support to conflict resolution and especially conflict prevention. Peacekeeping, there are norms concerning peacekeeping, and there are also formal memoranda of understanding between, say, the United Nations as an organization and some regional bodies, especially the AU, in relation to how matters to do with reduction of conflict and bringing development in place of conflict, I think, can be undertaken. But more and more, those conflicts in the region have been bad. They have not been, they are not things that anybody is happy about. But first of all, the AU as an AU and also sub-regional organizations have played useful roles, even if occasionally there have been missteps by one or two members of a particular of some of the sub-regions. But in the main, it is a problem, but its intensity has reduced, and the coordination of efforts, both sub-regionally and regionally, has been far better.
You know, the last time there was a Nigerian president of the UN Security, UN General Assembly, I believe it was a Brigadier General Joseph Garba. Is that correct?
Major General Joseph Garba, yes.
That was 1989. And he was able at least to lead the charge towards ending apartheid in South Africa and having a lot of those countries south of Limpopo become liberated. What is it that you came up with, if you were to talk to us from the deepest, better part of the bottom of your Nigerian heart and soul? What is it that you must accomplish during your tenure at the UN General Assembly in New York?
Well, thank you very much. Certainly, we as Africans, not just as Nigerians, take pride in the collective work we did to work with like-minded persons at the United Nations to help end apartheid. Nigeria played an important role, and General Garba was part of that process. Other Nigerian envoys at the UN before him also were part of that process, where in Nigeria, being considered as a frontline state, as if it were a South African country, took the lead as part of the African effort. Now, we are happy with that work. So is the continent. My own approach is that today, the global community represented by the United Nations as a body has agreed the Sustainable Development Goals, negotiated, agreed to 2015. And I'll be extremely happy to play a role to push the implementation of that agenda, because for Africa and for the world, those goals are important. And for Africa, because my own theme for the 74th session really reflects fundamentally those goals, and they resonate very well with Africa. They deal with poverty eradication, they deal with zero hunger, they deal with quality education, they deal with inclusion, they deal with climate action. These are really important issues for Africa, but also for the world. So mine is really now for today. We're not dealing with apartheid. We are lucky we have gone beyond it, but we are dealing with things that ravage humanity in terms of climate inaction, things that have to do with exclusion, things that have to do with poverty. So these are the ones now that are at the forefront of the effort globally. And I certainly have undertaken that the office will focus on those elements for the 74th session.
For the sake of the audience, I should point out that that agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals, were actually put in place by the last African president of the UN General Assembly, Ugandan Foreign Minister Sam Kutesa. So how far have we gone along that line? Do you have a report card on that, Mr. Ambassador? Mr.
Well, I think for us, one, we are having challenges by and large relating to what we are hearing. Financing has been an issue. Financing is important. But we also are having a remarkable sense of urgency, and that's why there will be a review during the 74th session around further commitments and commitments to action to guarantee that, one, we are able to achieve the goals by 2030, which is the timeline we have given to achieve what we have agreed to achieve in 2015, that we are also able to forge the necessary partnerships that are key to having all countries to achieve all the goals to the extent that it would make really a difference in the life of ordinary people. And that is really the task now, to push toward implementation, to find means of financing, to also share information and ideas about how countries that are struggling are able to really be assisted to succeed in getting the goals really reached. There are 17 of them, and they are really critical to all nations.
President Bande, let's humanize you a bit. As I did my homework, I learned, of course, that you come with impeccable credentials. You've been a leader in so many aspects of life, and you have done very, very, very well. Talk to us about what it is really like being president of the UN General Assembly and sitting on top of that Manhattan Secretariat. Walk us through, for example, a day in the life of Ambassador Dr. Bande, the President of the United Nations General Assembly. Walk us through a day in your life.
Well, I think for me it is really just an honor to have an opportunity to serve. Service is really the issue. I have been fortunate in my life, and education is key, and the support of others has been really necessary, and everyone has something to contribute to the well-being of their community, their society, and the world. And the frustrations that can happen in the life of Tijjani Bande can happen in the life of everyone. But the issue is really to put the goal very clear that we must achieve, because it is important for ourselves and for the world, to reduce inequality, to bring dignity to all human beings, and to sustain the environment in such a way that our grandchildren and those after them will have a world at peace, a world that is sustainably exploited for the benefit of future generations. This is really key. It is an important responsibility, and I am humbled by the support. I have gotten a lot of support, and it's not an individual work, but I am glad to be in this role at this moment.
Mr. President, who are your role models, or who is your role model? Who is the individual or individuals who lent you their shoulders to climb on so that you could see a little bit further than them?
Believe you me, there are many. It is difficult to mention one. I have had a lot of influences in my life. I learned from a lot of people for really, really different traditions. And I could mention many. Believe you me, there are many that I am humbled by what they have done, and I wish I am able to do a little like they have done. But it's not just one. There are many from different nations, even different cultures, different religions, that I find having done extremely well. Gandhi, you can talk of Mandela, you can talk of Sardauna in Nigeria, you can talk of Balewa, you can talk of Nkrumah, you can talk of Martin Luther King, you can talk of even younger ones, the work younger people are doing concerning the environment. These are also models for us today. The young girl who insists that we must have education at all costs. The young girl who insists that we should look after the environment. Those who defend religious sites of different religions, not their own. These are really there every day. They are there.
Unfortunately, time happens not to be our best ally. Next time, of course, I will ask you to talk to the small girl, the small boy in Abeokuta, Nigeria, what he or she needs to do in order to be able to walk effectively in your footsteps.
I'll be honored to engage in that discussion. It is a very important one. The youth are key.
Thank
really.
you. Thank you.